Okay. Okay, we can start. Is it live streaming as well?
No, not for this afternoon. We will
Okay.
upload the recording to the YouTube later on.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
So welcome everybody. And again, please make sure you don't ask the questions before you get the answers, because the answers come in the Sutta class, maybe. But you can do the questions afterwards. And a little break we have for 5 minutes, a letting go break in the toilet. So for today's Sutta class, I'm continuing on from the word of the Buddha. Now, many of you have got different versions of that. One of the reasons for that is always, like, as I said, a work in progress. So we're continuing to upgrade it, get new suggestions. So because of that, there are always new additions, new amendments. That's the way of the Dhamma. So the one I have, obviously, is the latest version. But to know the right page number, all we're going to start with is right mindfulness. That's the 7th factor of the Eightfold Path. We'll just see how much we can get done for that. And you cannot actually say how much, because sometimes we get some interesting ideas and we can actually embellish it with some other little stories to make it interesting. It's not like going to university for a lecture. It's not like being in school where you have to just sit down there and take notes. This is actually where you listen and get a deeper understanding of something you've already heard probably many, many times before. So anyway, here we go. Oh, I wanted to introduce this. I thought about this afternoon. The first time I heard about right mindfulness, the Satipatthana, was when I was still a lay Buddhist at Cambridge. And when I was a lay Buddhist there, they had a library. And the first book which I took out from that library was the Satipatthana Sutta, a translation into English, done by these 2 Sri Lankan monks. And I read the preface and I laughed my head off at just reading the preface, because the preface said that these 2 monks had, this is a long time ago, had gone to Burma to practice the Satipatthana because they'd understood that if you practice the Satipatthana for 7 days, you can become fully enlightened. And they thought that's a wonderful thing to do, to go to Sri Lanka, become enlightened. But they did the first course for 10 days, like 7 days, had a bit extra in the beginning and the end, but they weren't fully enlightened. So they did another course for Satipatthana, and they still weren't enlightened. And then they wrote afterwards that there must be something wrong here. We're not quite sure, but we're going to translate the sutta anyway. So they translated everything. And I always remembered that introduction. They were good monks. How come where the Buddha says that even in 7 days should be able to see the Dhamma, and these were 2 good monks who did it twice, still didn't see the Dhamma? Why? Now, always stayed with me, and the answer is pretty obvious, is that because they could not have been practicing it properly. The Buddha doesn't sort of mess around, doesn't lie. It means that somehow or other there were some parts of it that were missing. And so because of that, I always was very keen to translate the Satipatthana Sutta and to understand it in a deeper way. Even though the translations which I do may seem very easy for you to understand, that means it's a good translation. It's a waste of time having a translation which might seem accurate to scholars, but which other people just can't really get. Too much repetition. So anyway, this is a translation which I have, and it is well-founded of what the Satipatthana Sutta actually is. And it starts off with, as usual, the Buddha just introduces the subject. What now is right mindfulness? Mindfulness is a very good term. Right mindfulness, the word samma means the type of mindfulness which will lead not to you becoming a millionaire, or these days you should say billionaire, not to you becoming a sharpshooter in the US Marines. This is in order, right mindfulness is so that it can lead to the ending of all the suffering. So mindfulness is used in so many different ways, but why? What's its function? What's its purpose? And in Buddhism, our mindfulness has a purpose. Now, the four focuses of mindfulness, again, Satipatthana, instead of the four foundations of mindfulness, the actual foundations for mindfulness are the rest of the factors of the Eightfold Path. That's the foundation, that's the ground on which mindfulness is built on. And I will emphasize this a little while later. So it's not actually what the mindfulness is standing on, it's what the mindfulness is pointing to. So what mindfulness is pointing to here, the four focuses of mindfulness, is to the body, physical stuff, but especially your own physical body, the thing we call Vedana, which is your experience of life. And I will explain why I give the translation of Vedana as experience rather than feeling. The mind, the citta, and dhammas, mind objects, as number 4. These are what we focus on. If we focus on those with strong mindfulness, then there's a good chance we will actually see the Dhamma. So here we go. The four focuses of mindfulness, the Satipatthana, they lead in one direction only, to the purification of beings, to going beyond sadness and crying, to the disappearance of physical and mental suffering, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana. What are the four? Now that particular phrase there, that sometimes, and I think this was, monks should know better than this, translators, when they said the Satipatthana, the four Satipatthana, are the only way to Nibbana. That is clearly a misleading, wrong teaching. If you hear that, you say that that is not correct. The Satipatthana are what this comes from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Lead in one direction only. It's ekayana. It's not the only way. If you want to know what the only way to enlightenment is, that is well stated in the phrase Eso wamago nati anyo dasanasa visuddhya. This, the only way for the purification of insights. And that refers to the Eightfold Path. And you read elsewhere in the sutras, all over the sutras, it is the Eightfold Path, which is the only way, not just the seventh factor of the Eightfold Path, but the whole path. And just that point there was one reason why I say those two monks did not really get deep enough into their practice to actually to see some important insights. They were just doing right mindfulness without all the other factors. I will also refer back to what I said yesterday. If you have the same sheet of paper, right mindfulness, which I have here, then just above that, there was a little saying, like a poem by the Buddha. It's like just trying to summarize the right efforts, if you like, the right guardings, the right restraints, the samavayama. Guarding and abandoning, developing and maintaining, these four restraints were taught by the Buddha. By these means, a diligent meditator in this very life can attain the destruction of suffering. And even this is where the Buddha would talk. By these means doesn't mean just only these means. It's an important contributor, but it's not the only path. These are part of the path. And the only path was always meaning the Eightfold Path. You need to keep your precepts, have the right view, right motivation, as well as the right restraint, or samavayama, right mindfulness, and right stillness, samadhi. So, I'll repeat the phrase here: the four focuses of mindfulness lead in one direction only, to the purification of beings, to going beyond sadness and crying, to the disappearance of physical and mental suffering, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana. What are the four? And in the translation which I did of this, I put them 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually gave them numbers. It makes it easier to understand and remember. I'll read them out. Number 1, having restrained the 5 hindrances, you abide aware of the body, energized, knowing the purpose of what you're doing, and mindful. Number 2, having restrained the 5 hindrances, you abide aware of experience, vedana, energized, knowing the purpose of what you are doing, and mindful. Having restrained the 5 hindrances, you abide aware of the mind, chitta, energized, knowing the purpose of what you're doing, and mindful. Having restrained the 5 hindrances, you abide aware of mind objects, energized, knowing the purpose of what you're doing, and mindful. Those are the 4 satipatthanas. Now, each of those ones, the body, the first satipatthana, it's well known that that's what that satipatthana means. Rupa, that's your body. And the second satipatthana, instead of calling it Vedana, feelings can sometimes be misunderstood as emotional feelings. But this is talking about the experience which you have through your 6 senses. The 6th sense is obviously the mind. The other 5 senses are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touch. And even though they say Vedana, there's 3 types of Vedana, the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, it doesn't really hit very deeply that what Vedana means is experience of the sense world, a sensory experience. And sometimes it's hard to say, well, what is the neutral feeling? Because even neutral feeling can feel so happy sometimes. And is it really, it just makes it very difficult. These are just 3 different types of feelings. We can also have 5 or 6 different types of Vedana. You can have very happy, you can have just medium happy, or just in between, really sad or incredibly sad. You can have the happiness which is unworldly, like you get inspiration, or the happiness which is sensual, like you just won the lotto. You can have all types of different types of Vedana, but what it really means is the experience which you have of life. So that's one of the changes in the translation, which I have found is both accurate and it also is much more powerful when you explain the Satipatthana like that. But more importantly, in each one of these 4, it begins by saying, having restrained the 5 hindrances. Now, in the Pali, the word is vinaya, which means having restrained, loke abhijja domanasan. And in the in the translation which I first read, they said having abandoned grief and covetousness for the world. And to me, that never really made much sense. What does that truly mean? So it was wonderful to learn Pali and actually to see what those words truly mean. Loke abhijja is a synonym for the first hindrance, kama chanda. Because I was a monk and I was supposed to do this, I started learning Pali and also reading Pali, the whole of the Anguttara Nikaya. When I started reading the Anguttara Nikaya in Pali, I noticed that instead of having the usual form of the first hindrance, the first nivarana as kama chanda, The first hindrance was called Loke Abhija. So I've seen that one before. That's from the Satipatthana. And there are two suttas, only two I found, where the second hindrance, which is usually Vyapada, was actually called Domanassa. So there is a point, there is a good grounds for saying this is referring to the hindrances. And then when you look into the commentaries of the two Satipatthana suttas, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya and the Satipatthana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, in both those versions of the Satipatthana, the commentary explains what these terms mean. And they say exactly what I've just said. Loke Abhija means the first hindrance. Domanassa means the second hindrance. And when you put the first two of a usual combination, the first two, for example, okay, this is showing my age. Do you remember that rock band called the Beatles? John, George, Paul, and Ringo. Usually John, Paul, George, and Ringo. If you say John, Paul, that would actually refer to the whole four of a very common listing. That is an idiom, the way the Pali language works. If it's like the Four Noble Truths, just mention the first two Noble Truths would assume that you understand the second two, the third and fourth, are also to be included. They may not state that, it's an abbreviation, but nevertheless, that's how Pali works. So in both Satipatthana Sutta commentaries, they say Loke Abhija and Domanassa refer to the two hindrances, but all five hindrances are meant. And for Vinaya, Vinaya is like the Vinaya for the monk. It's how you restrain your actions of body, speech. So, you don't talk, gossip. You don't hold money. You don't break sensual precepts. This is a training for you to restrain these things. And so Vinaya, being translated as restrain, is accurate. But it's not only accurate, supported by the commentaries, supported by other suttas. When you read it now, having restrained the five hindrances, then you're aware of the body of experience of mind objects, knowing the purpose of what you're doing and mindful. But that's the prerequisite, what you do first of all. Now, I did also mention, I think yesterday and a little bit this morning, that is why I read out the right restraints or the right guardings or right efforts, whichever you wish to call them, the Samma Vayama, number 6. Because the reason why you practice those right efforts, call it that if you wish, is to weaken the five hindrances. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Remember, guarding the mind so these hindrances don't come in. The hindrances are in, you abandon them, you find ways of getting rid of them. You develop and maintaining the opposite of the five hindrances, which the Buddha said was the 7 enlightenment factors. And also you maintain those in your mind. So if you can see that connection there, the 6th factor of the Eightfold Path, Samma Vayama, which we read out yesterday, that is there to actually restrain the five hindrances through guarding the mind, abandoning things which come into the mind, which developed desire and ill will, and developing and maintaining the positive states of mind, where those five hindrances can grow, their opposites can actually not be sustained. And for me, that is one of the most important reasons why those two monks never really made much progress, because the five hindrances were still too strong. Elsewhere, the Buddha said it's the 5 hindrances which weaken wisdom, which actually stop you being still in deep meditation. The 5 hindrances are like the enemies. And so this is one of the reasons why you restrain the 5 hindrances through your right efforts. And you, once they're restrained, now you're ready to practice the mindfulness training. So that's the general for all of the 4 focuses of mindfulness that is required to having restrained the 5 hindrances. Then you are aware of the body, experience, mind objects, energized. To be energized, this is again why the 4 focuses of mindfulness, why the 5 hindrances, they don't just mean you're abandoning, desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse and doubt. You're actually just increasing your energy. In another sutta, the Nalakapana Sutta, because when you develop the stillness of deep meditation, you find not only do the 5 hindrances stop for a long period of time and don't come into your mind for a long period of time, but also that you abandon tandi, which is tiredness, and arati, which is like negativity. And especially the idea of when those hindrances start to disappear, you do have this energy come up into the mind. And that's in the Nalakapana Sutta. And that energy which comes up into the mind, that's where you can do the Satipatthana with energy. You're not getting bored. And because you're energetic, you can see clearly. But it's also knowing the purpose, what you're doing this for. And what you're doing this for is so you can understand the nature of the body, the nature of experience, Vedana, of sensory experience, the nature of the mind, this chitta, and the nature of Dhamma, to understand these things. And of course, you're mindful. So I went in great detail in that because that is important for all of the 4 focuses of mindfulness. Now, the mindfulness of the body, the first of the Satipatthanas. The Buddha now describes, what is this? What is the mindfulness of the body? How are you aware of the body? And he gives a number of examples. The first being anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. And this is also important to know that anapanasati and satipatthana are one and the same. You can't say that one is different than the other, or one needs to be done first and the other one does afterwards. They're done together, always. Now, mindfulness of breathing. You go to a quiet, secluded place, sit down comfortably, and give priority to establishing mindfulness. That's the first sentence. Now, sometimes, for really best within the world, scholars, especially lay scholars who have never meditated very much, have tried to do translations of these things to bring them to people's attention. But sometimes once they make a translation, either the translation doesn't make sense, or it is just not accurate enough to give it power or meaning. So you go to a quiet, secluded place. Sometimes the literal translation is you go to like a forest, an empty abode, a quiet place or whatever. And instead of having just these places which were quiet, maybe sort of 2,500 years ago, what it really means is a secluded, quiet place. A place where you can meditate comfortably without being disturbed. And that's very hard to find in today's world, a place of seclusion. And that's why it is not a very bad idea. It's actually quite a very good idea to have Zoom retreats where you can meditate at home. This is your residence. And surely you can find a place in one of your rooms somewhere which is quiet. If it's not that quiet, you can put earbuds, in your ears. And I mention that because many years ago, again, when I used to go traveling, if it was a long haul flight, say from Australia to London, there was always overnight, and I could never really have a good night's sleep. And the reason was, the plane was always noisy. And because of that, someone told me that the solution is having these professionally made sort of earbuds. And you had to go to an audiologist. The reason why this was popular in Western Australia, because there was so much mining. And in the mines, it was an enclosed place, and it was very noisy. And so the people working down there had to wear these things. And so that somebody sponsored this, and they squeezed some like silicone gel in both ears, waited for it to set, took them out, and that was the mold for these wonderful earplugs. And because people didn't know what monks got up to, they knew I wasn't working in the mines. So when they actually handed them over to me, all finished, he said, "Oh, now your wife's snoring won't interrupt you, Mr. Brahm." And I said, "I haven't got a wife, I'm a monk." But I said, "I'm using this for resting on board aircraft." And so, "Oh yeah, sorry," they said. But anyway, so I had these earplugs, and honestly, the first time I used them on a flight, it wasn't to sleep. I used them to meditate. But it was such an incredible experience of having all the major sound taken away that I actually did fall asleep, I'm honest with you. And when I came out of my sleep, I needed to go to the toilet, so I got up and walked to the toilet. And it was a great experience, I don't mind saying it, because I thought, this is really weird. The aircraft is so silent. What's going on? And I realized I was still wearing my earplugs. They were very, very good. And so that gave me the opportunity even to do nice meditation on board an aircraft. So there's ways and means you can find that seclusion. That seclusion is that inner feeling of seclusion. You don't need to go and find a place thousands of miles away from anybody on top of a mountain, which is really cold and you don't know what to do next. Even in your rooms or in sometimes beautiful places like monasteries or caves or something, they're very, very nice if they're peaceful. And sometimes they're not that peaceful. So you find a place somewhere in your house, even during lockdown. Lockdown is great because people can't come and go. So you can find usually in lovely places where you can spend some solitude. So when you have that seclusion, that's the first thing before you do mindfulness of breathing. Then you sit down comfortably. Now, the original translation, you sit down cross-legged with the back straight, which is great if you're young and fit. I can still do that. But how many of you, if you had to follow that, as it's said in the scriptures, you had to cross your legs and sit with a straight back, how many of you would give up meditation because you've had sports accidents or you've had motorbike accidents or something where you can't cross your legs that easily anymore and your back can't stay that straight? That's one of the reasons why, to me, it was so obvious. I had a good back. I could sit cross-legged. My knees are great. I can sit cross-legged for hours. But many people can't. And that's why in retreat centers, which I built, I raised the funds for it, I made sure there were chairs comfortable chairs, not too comfortable, not like these lazy boy chairs where you press a button and this goes out and this goes out and it's just warm and not too much, but at least a chair which is comfortable enough that you can sit on and the body feels at peace. And when I started doing this and people started complaining, Ajahn Brahm, you should train your disciples to sit on the floor. And at that time, when I used to go on pilgrimage to India, I'd love taking them to a place outside of Rajagaha. It was the old university, Nalanda University. And there, I always made sure taking them to one of the walls there, where there was an ancient carving of the Buddha sitting on a chair. I say, if the Buddha could sit on a chair, why can't we? And you find it makes meditation so much more easy and so much more comfortable and allows you to get so much deeper. So if you like sitting on chairs and it's comfortable for you, great. Find out the most comfortable position for you on that chair. And you will have some great meditations. You don't have to sit on the floor cross-legged on broken glass with a straight back in great pain to be able to get deep meditation. In fact, if you go for pain, you won't get deep meditation very easily. So it's not the middle way. So you sit down comfortably, and the next thing is you give priority to establishing mindfulness. And this was another wonderful insight from this sutta, and also from my life as a meditator. Because my problem was, I already mentioned I suffered from hay fever. So there was a time when my nose was blocked. And so I was meditating, and they said, watch the breath at the tip of your nose. There was no breath at the tip of my nose. My nose was blocked. I had hay fever. I thought it was colds at first, but later on in life, I realized it wasn't colds, it was hay fever. It blocked all the nose up. I couldn't breathe through my nose. So I thought at that time, meditation during the summertime when the hay fever season was strong, I thought I can't meditate at that time. The rest of the year, okay, but hay fever season, no. And later on, when I started to become interested in being a monk, I heard another way of watching the breath was watching the belly rise and fall, rise and fall. But then when I became a young monk, that didn't work either. The reason was I was so close to my tummy. And in the afternoon and evening, I was hungry. And so I started watching that area of my body. I started watching the stomach rising and falling, but it went straight to my belly straight to my stomach after that. Oh, I want something to eat. Oh, I'm only a young monk. I'm not enlightened yet. I need something to eat. And you couldn't because you were a novice monk at the time. So that caused trouble. But then it was so wonderful to realize there's something wrong with this. You look to the sutta, and you see it never said to watch the tip of your nose. It never said to watch the belly. It said this word to give this parimukkhang, it's called. Parimukkhang, it means like to give it priority, put it first, put it in front, not in front of you, not in front of your nose, not in front of your belly, but put it in front. In other words, the first thing on the list, to have mindfulness first. And that was, of course, amazing, because I needed to make sure I was aware, mindful, strong mindfulness, and then you can start watching your breathing. What that meant in practice was that I spent some time developing present moment awareness and silence. My definition of mindfulness. You're not talking back to life. You're listening. You're aware of what's going on. Not trying to make conclusions, but just being aware, silently aware of what's happening. And that awareness is not what happened in the past, which is always distorted. I said that with clarity. The past is always distorted. What you think happened, you're only collecting a fraction of what happened. And the future, of course, is so uncertain. Hasn't happened yet, and it can always be changed. Your future, you're changing it right now. So anyway, the mindfulness is this silent awareness in the present moment. If any of you have read some of the first books which I wrote on how to meditate, it was sitting down comfortably and developing that present moment awareness and silence. And then what happens next is you have sufficient mindfulness to watch the breathing easily. In other words, you don't just have to watch the breath and force your mind onto it. It happens almost automatically. For me, it is automatic. And you can watch the breath for a long period of time. It's not just watching the in-breath, out-breath, in-breath, out-breath for three or four breaths. It's hundreds of breaths. You don't miss any, because your mindfulness is strong enough to do that. One of the big problems with mindfulness of breathing is that people just start to watch their breath way too early. The mindfulness is not strong enough yet to be aware of the breath, which means always chasing after it, grabbing onto it, getting frustrated, thinking they can't meditate. And that's not a good way to have the beautiful happiness, peace, and depth in your meditation practice. So we establish mindfulness. That's what it says we do here, as a priority. There's many other ways of establishing mindfulness. I've said many of them. One of them is just to get the energy up for it, and that inspiration. You know that sometimes, I always remember this, some of the great talks I heard from Ajahn Brahm, sometimes they were so beautiful. You know, I understood how he spoke Thai and Lao at the time. I could translate for him often. And then you get so inspired, uplifted. Wow, this is incredible, wonderful. And that was a beautiful way of encouraging, establishing mindfulness. And then you go watching whatever you want to watch, and the mindfulness is strong, and you can do that for a long period of time with no effort at all. It's beautiful. Or you can do other things like just recording some of the wonderful things which you have done. There was one of the stories which I usually tell this at every entry to the rains day we do over here, because this was the amazing lay disciple Visakha, the most, I would call her the wisest, not most generous, of the Buddha's female lay disciples. Because she came up to the Buddha and said, "Can I have permission, please, to offer a rainy season bathing cloth?" So the monks and the nuns could actually bathe outside when there's a big rainstorm, because bathing in the rivers was a bit too dangerous when the rivers were in flood. Can I offer rainy season bathing cloths to all the bhikkhunis, all the bhikkhus who come to this, for the rains retreat in this place? And also, she said, can I also offer food to people, monks and nuns, when they first come here, when they leave, if they're sick, people looking after the sick, can I just do this, no one else? And of course, you know, that seems a bit sort of discriminatory. Why should I just give this to you and no one else? And then she said this beautiful, insightful words. Well, if you can let me do this and no one else, I will realize that every monk or nun in this monastery who got a deep meditation or insight during this retreat, that I would have given them something, a robe. I would have given them food when they first came, maybe looking after them if they got sick. I would have supported them. And I know how to make the best use of that good karma which I have done. I will remember that. And that will inspire me. And that inspiration might be enough for me to break through into deep meditation or see the Dhamma and gain these great states of enlightenment myself. When the Buddha heard that, okay, deal. He didn't actually say that in those words, but he agreed to it. Now, so out of character for the Buddha to agree to give the one person that privilege. You can see why he did that, because he was emphasizing that all the good karma each one of you listening to this has done, if you know how to make use of it, to recall it before you meditate, that is how, one way, how we arouse mindfulness as a priority in front of us. Wow, you get alive, clear and joyful. And then when you go to things like watching the breath, it's pretty simple to do so. Now, that is all I'm going to say now about the first part of the Satipatthana Sutta, which I now look at is just half a page of many pages. But I don't care, because it's important stuff. And tomorrow we'll go further with the Satipatthana Sutta. But I think that's enough for now. I hope you've got some questions. I'm sure you will. But before you have those questions, it is now the 5-minute toilet break. So, but remember, if you go to the toilet, as you walk into the toilet, please make sure you do it slowly, energized, knowing the purpose of what you're doing and mindful. So it can be no different than everything else you do in this meditation retreat. And when you let go, just let go, relax to the max, and then things always come out nice and easily. No matter how many people, they stress themselves out in the toilet, and they don't even know how to go to the toilet, let alone how to meditate. So little by little, the Satipatthana Sutta applies even to the loo. So, okay, off you go and practice.
You don't have to go.
No,
If you don't need to go, you don't need to go.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Of course. Over here it's really warm, very warm day today. And so you sweat a lot. So I went to the toilet before, and that's enough for now. I need some water to drink.
Yeah, me too. No chance, not yet.
So there we go. More energy tonight.
A lot of people are not needing to go. Let's see. So please do start writing in your questions if you have them to Q&A Derek, and he will pass them on to me.
Yeah. And all the easy ones you can give to me, and you can ask the difficult ones later on. It's very helpful. I just chatting. Very helpful to be able to watch the breath, not at the tip of the nose, not at your belly, but just to watch the breath. Is my breath going in? Is my breath going out? That's all I need to know. It's only later on think of how do you know that? Where actually is the breath going in and going out? I did it a few times just for fun. And a lot of the time it was going out, in and out through the tip of the nose, through the nose. But other times it went in and out through the mouth because nose was blocked. Didn't really matter. So this way of meditation is much more usable in all sorts of different scenarios. These days you may be wearing a mask because of COVID. And the mask can be very uncomfortable. And so I remember the first time I was wearing a mask, and it was in an aircraft just going within Western Australia from Perth to Albany. And it was very uncomfortable. So I thought, hey, let's do some meditation. When you meditate, you relax, you don't need so much oxygen, and get comfortable. So many little things when you meditate can be great help everywhere.
Interestingly, Ajahn, one of the first questions to come in is asking you to say more about that, because this person's saying, thanks for talking about practicing with a blocked nose, as it's often like that for me. Breathing is not a comfortable or pleasant place to rest my attention. Can you say any more about that?
Okay, here's the big one. It was one of these retreats I gave years ago. It was so inspiring because it was a 9-day retreat, residential retreat. And the very first evening, there were lots of questions, the same questions in the box. Can you please ask everybody to breathe in quietly? To breathe quietly. And the reason was because there was one gentleman in the retreat who was breathing like this through his mouth. It was really loud. And when I told everybody that gentleman is dying of sinus cancer, he checked in with me when he first arrived. He wasn't really a devoted Buddhist, but he did hear that meditation can sometimes alleviate cancer, so he wanted to give it a try. And it's so wonderful when people know why a person is making a noise when they're breathing. Now, those people who asked that question, can you please ask people to breathe in quietly? He couldn't. And so instead of being upset, they gave him so much kindness, compassion. We don't mind him breathing in loud, please. We're so inspired that he's actually trying to overcome his cancer this way. And so I was really impressed with the kindness of everybody. If it was just a person making a noise, they'd have kept on complaining. When they realized why, they were kind. And then what happened at the end? You know this story. I love telling stories which inspire me. Things actually work. The last meditation. So he came, at the end, I had to leave early to get to Sydney Airport to get back to Perth. But he came running out. He said, Ajahn Brahm, don't go yet, please, please, please. So I was meditating on last meditation, and he heard a popping sound. Pop. And he could breathe through his nose for the first time in months. Only for 1 minute, he said. But that really encouraged him. And by the way, these things always happen in the last meditation, never before. I'll mention more about that later. But anyway, he said, what should I do now? It's working. It closed up, but I had 1 minute clear, breathing through my nose. I said, well, just carry on. And we got in the car and went back to Perth. But I thought he'd left it too late. Of course he didn't. He carried on meditating, and I saw him 6 months later in another talk, and he did this opening statement, which please never do to monks like myself or Ayachanda or anybody. He said, do you remember me? Now, when he was at the retreat, he had cancer, he was dying, he looked all really thin and wasted. And this guy, who said, do you remember me? He was just in a nice suit, he looked really fit and healthy. He said, I was that guy. I carried on meditating, and look what he did to me. It's in full remission now. The tumor just lessened and disappeared. Of course, that made me really happy. So what are you doing now? He said, for the rest of my life, however many more years I have, I'm going to teach other people how to do this. So yes, wonderful, thank you. That's the best way, what we call not saying just thanks, but paying it forward, helping other people. I'm so happy about that. But there was a case if you can't breathe quietly through your nose, learn to breathe, you're breathing. Just know you're breathing in and breathing out. How you're doing it, who cares? So the breath going in, breath going out, that's enough. Even if it's going in through your ear hole or through your left thumb, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so we've got quite a few questions coming, and one says that when working in a non-Buddhist setting, mindfulness is taught in a much restricted way. If you could give advice, would you suggest I should fit in with the way it's taught by non-Buddhists or ... I'm aware there's no mention of sila, for example.
Yes, indeed. Sila will make mindfulness easier. Now, the trouble is that many times when you're taught mindfulness training, you have to pay for it. What you get from Anukampa retreats is priceless. It's not free, because free means people don't think it has any value. Priceless is beyond paying any money for it. That's why we give it out always without any cost, but its value is huge. So the first thing, that this is the cheapest and the best, what you get here. And number two is, that's how it's taught. You can actually get something out of that from other people, but you don't, like when you go to university or go to school, you learn, say, history. You don't just listen to one lecturer, you listen to many lecturers, and one is really strong in this part of history, and the other one is strong in another part of history. And that's where you get a rounded education. And so with mindfulness, if you listen to somebody else teach mindfulness, who's not a Buddhist, you get a fraction of what works. It can be useful, but then add to it yourself with all these other areas of skill which you learn.
Good. Thanks, Ajahn. The next question is, how do I know when I'm ready for breath meditation? Thanks.
You don't know when you're ready for breath meditation. What happens is the breath comes to you. You don't go to it. How does a flower know when it's the right time to bloom? It doesn't think, oh, what should I do now? I should have listened to the elder flowers so I know the right time to bloom. It's not an intellectual exercise. It just happens naturally. I think I don't know if I told you, but just because I celebrated 47 years as a monk, and it was on a big day in town, they offered me some flowers. Well, it's really nice offering Ajahn Brahm flowers for my 47th year anniversary as a monk. But you know what species of flowers they were? They weren't sort of marigolds. Yeah, they're cauliflowers. That's not being disrespectful. I encourage things like that because they can be used afterwards, make some soup or some good veggies afterwards. But that was really good. I really enjoyed that. So that, because otherwise my nose stuffs up.
Okay, you'll get cauliflowers next time you come to England.
Yay.
Okay, all right, the next question. Among all the tricks you're sharing with us, the one that seems to work best for me is to perceive this body, and especially this wanting, as not me, not a self. This really cuts identification and the interest in controlling the process. How can I deepen this perception?
Okay, well, just keep practicing it. But you'll find there's many tools which you use. And after a while, if you use one tool too much, it gets blunt. You have to be resharpened. And one of the best ways of resharpening, you have a number of tools which you use. One of the great tools I use is always like kindness. And sometimes you just pause in the meditation and may not get powerful yet. So be kind and contented. And then it just takes off. And one of the other tools which I use, which I learned is from prison. What's the difference between a prison and a monastery? And generally, it's in a prison, you don't want to be there. In a monastery, you want to be there. That's the only difference. If you look at the ascetic practices in a monastery, in a prison, it's much more comfortable. You have a much thicker mattress in the prison than you do in a monastery. You have many more choices of food which you want. In a monastery, you don't have to get up. In a prison, you don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I remember when one of the monks told the prisoners, we have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. 4 o'clock in the morning. Even murderers don't have to get up that time, they were saying. So, and then one of the prisoners, they told this monk that they got to like. They said, that's terrible living in your monastery. Why don't you come in here and stay with us instead? There's a constant joke that if we ever get arrested, we'll have a good time in jail, monks. It's much more comfortable. But that's only a bit of a That's another joke, because there was this Thai monk who was put in jail for 2 years. He was actually set up as a very, very, very good monk. But he was such a good monk, he was about to become the head monk of Thailand. And the one just behind him just was jealous and set up charges that he was a communist. He got put in jail for 2 years, but eventually he got exonerated. And when he got exonerated, they said, it was a terrible thing, we put you in jail. He said, what do you mean? He said, a wonderful time in jail. He could actually just read all these books he'd always promised himself to read. He had no sort of distractions at all. He didn't need to teach anybody. He could sort of have reasonably good food. And it was like in a cell. It's like being on retreat for 2 years, he said. And that's a real story. Chaukun Siddhimuni, I think it was called. And people like that you really respect. He was a scholar, but also a meditator. And he was put in jail for something he never did, but he was very happy for it. He made the most of it. So anyway, so learning how to be free, even in a jail. So that's why I sometimes stop myself and ask myself, are you happy to be here? And if I'm not, that's the problem. In my meditation, doesn't matter what's happening, am I happy to be here? If I am, wonderful. You start getting deeper and deeper and deeper. If you've got this beautiful nimitta coming up, I want jhanas. It's unfair. I need a jhana today. He said, that's stupid. You're in a beautiful nimitta. Isn't that enough for you? He said, I'm happy with this. This is enough. Thank you. And of course, if that's your attitude, I'm happy to be here. You get deeper very quickly. So there's a few other little things. Yeah, go on.
Okay. So, next question?
Yeah.
Yep. So today I experienced anxiety as my heart started to beat strong and fast, and I had a feeling like it could go out of my chest. Just recently, I faced the sudden death of my dog, so it's also one of the reasons why I could be more sensitive than usual at this moment. And maybe this could be the reason for such a state. Anyway, I succeeded in passing through this, and at one moment, my heart and its beats were in the right place and rhythm. Is this okay to experience during meditation? I think I was afraid to let go. How can I be stronger if it happens next time? Also, this feeling is one of the reasons why I'm escaping elevators and flights. And thank you for enabling me to face this state directly. So,
yeah, you face, you survive. Yeah, remember that. Don't remember the sort of the difficulty of it, but remember the fact you went through it. And you can go through so many other things in life. So it is pretty common. I was just listening carefully, because sometimes we get anxiety and our heart starts beating fast in meditation, because you're about to get into some deep states of mind. It's a way that sometimes the mind reacts with excitement of something beautiful, not something dangerous. And that means that it could be a good state of mind. And if you were in front of me, I would ask you, how did you feel before that your heart started beating so fast? What was happening to you? Were you getting into nice peaceful states of mind and maybe the body was disappearing? If that was the case, just next time that happens, just bring it on, heart. And after a while, the heart would just be nice and quiet and peaceful, and just you won't even feel your heart anymore as you go deep into the mind. Sometimes that happens. It's just the excitement of meditation. This is really great stuff. And so that's why people's heart gets very strong, beats very fast when you are excited, not just because of fear. Excited is something great pleasure, also great achievement. And well done. If you just, you just found out you won the lotto. Yay, your heart will start beating fast. That's not a bad reason for your heart to start beating fast. So because of that, you can understand that that's one of the reasons. But if it is something which is a dangerous, maybe you're sensitive and some fear comes up, but just you can't be hurt at all. It's the panic itself, the anxiety itself is the problem, not what you're anxious about, but just anxiety itself. That's why some of the times you just look at anxiety, putting some space between you and that experience is very helpful. because you have more of a view of it, a wiser view of it. If you're right in the crowd, you can't see it at all. Your view is all obscured. But if you're standing on the ground looking at the crowd, it just floats by and it doesn't really affect you. So having a distance separating the idea of a viewer from what you're experiencing, it does mean it doesn't affect you nowhere near as much. So just stand back and just watch the heart, boom, 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 boom. That's fine. Because you don't buy into it and get excited with it, you're not adding anxiety to anxiety. It soon just lessens and just fades away. And next, of course, never go into the future. In the future, this must be something really terrible. I'm going to die. There's something wrong. Because the future, you can make all sorts of scenarios. A lot of times, those scenarios are negative. It's best not to make any future at all. You're right here, you're living, you're experiencing it, it's interesting. Stay with it. Even enjoy it. It's teaching you something. What is the lesson it's teaching you? Okay.
All right. When doing loving kindness meditation and then getting colors and lights for some seconds, what should you do? Just carry on seeing the lights or go back to loving kindness meditation?
Carry on seeing the lights. And if they're really good, they'll just carry on and get bigger and bigger and be more and more beautiful. But don't make any decisions. Just as the lights are happening, enjoy them. And if they're not strong enough, then you go back to loving kindness automatically. As you go in deeper and deeper into that lotus, all those petals open up in order. When they close in reverse order. So as you go deep and deep into the meditation, when you come out again, you go in reverse order. So before those beautiful lights, you see the loving kindness or the breath, whatever it is. So that's going to happen. So just let the mind decide. Don't interrupt the process. Don't make decisions of what you're supposed to do.
Okay, this is about the Satipatthana. There's a couple of questions here. So Ajahn mentioned emotions are different from feelings. What is the difference, and where in the 5 aggregates do emotions fit in? So that's the first part.
Okay. Well, again, in the Satipatthana, I was just referring to the Vedana. And the Vedana, instead of calling it like the feelings, that's a usual translation, and like happy, unhappy, or neutral. That is a bit too cold and not wide enough. So I prefer the word experience. Now, when it comes to emotions and feelings, where does that fit in to the Satipatthana?
The aggregates.
So the aggregates. And with those aggregates, they do go into each other. They're not just separate categories, that they sometimes overlap. For example, just when you have perceptions, perceptions and experience and sankharas, consciousness, they sort of meld into one another. So when you say emotions, they're mostly, I would say, sankharas. They also, they can be known as Vedanas as well, and also perceptions. So they sort of go over a number of the components of existence, the khandhas. That's why it's very difficult. But I know one thing with emotions, it sort of was very tricky for me at a while. I thought all emotions are bad and should be overcome. And so you got to see these amazing ones like an Ajahn Chah, who's very smiley, very loving, and very funny at times. And so his emotions, you can never see any negative emotions from him, but positive emotions were there in abundance. So when we get to the things like the emotional world, what we're supposed to do, what actually happens naturally, is the positive emotions get encouraged and developed, and the negative emotions are the ones which get abandoned. I remember seeing one monk years and years ago, and seeing him, he was like a robot, like an automaton. You ask him a question, you try to get him to laugh. There's no way he would laugh in front of you. I was told that when he was with his friends, he would laugh, but not in public. I thought, well, what's going on here? Because we weren't playing the game of enlightenment. We were just developing this beautiful positive emotions, and negative emotions were just disappearing. And eventually, we're getting enough wisdom that when we die, like that, one of my great monk friends, Dr. Kesri Dhammananda, he was the one who, when he was told that his cancer was terminal, he burst out laughing. A couple of days later, he passed away. A wonderful sort of expression of freedom. You know you're going to die, and you have a laugh. Positive emotions in abundance.
Okay. So the second part of the question is that also in the Satipatthana Sutta, what I've read refers to internally and externally. What exactly does this mean?
Well, it means ajatang and bahida. Ajatang means adiatang. It means in your own body and mind. Basically, your personal experience. And the bahida means other people's, other beings. So you see that, when you understand, say, rupa, or you understand vedana experience, your experience and other beings' experiences are the same. You don't think that somehow I am special and I can't get enlightened, but these monks and nuns, oh, they're so special. They must have been born enlightened. They're not the same as us, That's sometimes what people think. They discriminate. So what you understand is, through the practice of things like Satipatthana, there's no special beings. They're all the same. But some beings have let go much more. Such beings are kinder, wiser, and they're going to disappear after the end of this existence. But the nature applies to all. Just like I say this because I'm a physicist, the laws of physics, they apply to all matter, not just some matter and not other matter. Just these laws are indiscriminate. So the laws which apply to you as a bhikkhuni apply to me as a bhikkhu, apply to laymen, laywomen. They're the laws of Dhamma. So that Dhamma is the same for each one of us, internal, externally. Impermanent, so unpredictable, suffering, and no being here, no self. For all of us, there's not special beings in the sense of their nature is different than anybody else's. It's one of the reasons why some people are special in this lifetime, but other people in other lifetimes will catch up. There'll be other enlightened beings later on, other Buddhas later on.
So, Ajahn, can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go on.
Talking about conditions externally. So the way I understand it also through my experience as not having the same conditions as monks and being very marginalized in my particular role, is that it really isn't to do with our capacity or our qualities, which determine how far we can walk on the path. It's actually all down to conditions. And I think this is sometimes not emphasized enough in Buddhism. And the Buddha actually did emphasize that we need conducive conditions like the 4 requisites to be enlightened. So I think that also in terms of social justice and all kinds of racism or sexism or any other discriminatory systems, that it can be easy to look at those people and say, oh, see, they're suffering, it must be something wrong with them. But what about the systems that actually discriminate and make life a lot harder for certain marginalized groups? So I wonder if you can say something to that.
But in Buddhism, we don't just look at one life, we look at many lives. And this is the case that sometimes to create a simile to emphasize this point, it's like there was an alien came down to say UK and had a look in the school. and saw these kids in grade 1, grade 2, 3, 4 doing pretty much the same. Sorry, and doing their sort of learning. Then went away for 10 years and then went back after 10 years and looked at the schools 10 years on and still see like these young kids doing pretty much the same as they did 10 years ago. He thought they haven't learned anything from this. What happens is actually with people we move through all these different stages of existence. And it's inspiring, to see that we have to sort of make it more equitable. And I just busted a gut trying to do that. And there's still huge amounts more to be done. And it's not just for women, bhikkhunis. It's for disabled people, LGBTQT, yes. So I usually get it right, but it wouldn't come out of my mouth. But all the people who are discriminated against, huge numbers. But nevertheless, when we're doing sort of satipatthana, if we can actually do that practice, then we learn just the nature of a being. I'm not just saying human beings, even animals is something which is so similar. And not just human beings and animals, but even heavenly beings, devas. And those beings also exist. I'm saying this as a physicist. Evidence is pretty sort of compelling. And so you look at all these beings when it comes to the body, just how it is. It rises and passes away. It dies, it gets old. You can't rely upon it. You don't know when it's going to die. Look at Vedana. That's one of the wonderful things about understanding Vedana. It's just the experience, what is like happiness, the pleasure. It's just the gap between two experiences of suffering. I've never felt so healthy as when I come out of hospital. You need that suffering to understand happiness. That's why I think St. Augustine said in Christian theology, that this is Christian theology, okay? When you go to heaven, then you have to go to hell for 1 day a year. Otherwise, you'll never appreciate heaven. And so you need something to see against what you're experiencing. So Vedana, there's no such thing as permanent happiness. Can't be. There's no such thing as permanent suffering. There can't be. The only way that you can get out of suffering and happiness is to end Vedana altogether. As me, as you, as everybody. Some people have more happiness than others. They still have their suffering. Some people have more suffering than others, but they still have their happiness. I was always interested in stories of poor people in Auschwitz. They still had jokes and laughed. And when I first read that, I thought, this is strange. How can you, in such a dark place, have laughter and happiness? So, as everybody. And that's the same with the citta, the mind. It's not that some people are born like avatars or special beings, which are not the same as everybody else. Everybody else is the same in that regard. Much more essential than just the discrimination and not having equal opportunities. When we see that, we try to do the very best. But behind that, there's always something very similar between each one of us.
Okay.
I agree with you, but we're talking on a different focus point.
Okay. I'll think about that.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so one more question from the group. I suffer from chronic migraines. Any tips for meditating with excruciating head pain? Thank you, Ajahn.
Okay. Yeah, I've got lots of stories over the years. There was one of the supporters. He used to be in the British Army, in a long time ago. He did that because of another escape from poverty up in the north of England somewhere. But he always had these chronic high migraines. And what he did was, when he had an attack of a migraine, he'd find a dark, quiet place, and he'd say he didn't know anything about Buddhism, but he would go inside the migraine to the place where it didn't exist. And I didn't really understand exactly what he was doing until he started to explain it in detail. And he said he was once on his maneuvers in West Germany, and this is after the war, obviously, in those days when the British Army were all over the place. And he was, he had a migraine attack, and so he was like the sergeant in charge of a few troops. And he said, on exercises, he said, look, you go and stop and have a cup of tea. There's a barn over there. I'm going to go inside and have a quiet time to overcome my migraine, which he did. But when the order came through, they had to move to the next destination. They forgot their sergeant, left him in the barn. When they realized they'd forgotten him, they quickly went back. They saw him in the barn. It was so peaceful. And they literally lifted him up and put him in the back of the truck. And a few miles down the road, he came out of his, whatever he was in. When he described it to me, I realized that what he'd been in was like a jhana. That's when the five senses vanish. He was perfectly aware in a very peaceful place, inside the migraine, where the migraine couldn't get to him. The migraine was a bodily sensation. And anyway, he said that that's what really got him very interested in meditation and Buddhism. But later on in his life, the migraine vanished. And he said he can't get into the deep meditations anymore. And he said he's very happy the migraine went, a bit disappointed that with it was his ability to get into deep meditation. So the positive part of that is you do have migraines. See if you can go into a quiet place, comfortable place, and go into it, right to its center. And keep centering, not with force. Force is wanting for the future, wanting to get somewhere. But this is actually going into it, deeply into it. And you may be surprised. It might disappear.
Okay, there are a couple more questions now, Ajahn.
Please,
so shall I continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please continue.
All right. So someone's saying, I'm one of the small percentage of people who does not see or think with mental images. Are the nimittas dependent on being able to see in that way? If so, can they be experienced in other ways, e.g. the kinesthetic experience? Thank you.
Kinesthetic, what is that?
Kinesthetic, like physically.
Oh,
through the senses, through the physical senses.
Yeah, not really, because those five senses turn off. But what might happen is you have an experience which you interpret as a physical sense. In other words, when you see images as a nimitta, you are not seeing light. The sense of seeing, sight, is turned off. You're seeing something which is very beautiful, and you perceive it as a light. The reason why you perceive it as a light is not a light, you're not seeing things. The reason you perceive it as that is because most people in our world, the sense of sight is the dominant sense. One of the reasons why you identify people by how they look. And on the passport, you don't have your smell on the passport, you have your face, how it looks. That's one of the reasons why the sense of sight is dominant for most adults. And that is one of the reasons why when the five senses stop, you see, so that's why the nimittas are usually experienced as lights. Sometimes that people have stronger sense of smell or sound, and sometimes it can be experienced as sound. And these are times when a person, it's happened a few times, they've been meditating in a very peaceful place, usually on a retreat with many other people, and they think they're hearing this beautiful music. And there's no music being played. And it's beautiful, it's gorgeous stuff. I can't identify what instrument it is, but it's really almost like divine. And sometimes I think, are there heavenly beings in this retreat, or what's happening? I said, no, it's because you're obviously very strong, orderly. You have a lot of sensitivity with sound, and you're experiencing this nimitta. Nimitta is always the same, but you're perceiving it as a sound, or sometimes perceiving it as a smell, like jasmine flowers or something, or like sandalwood. And there's no jasmine flowers or sandalwood anywhere close. But it always has to be when you're very peaceful, really happy, a lot of joy in this, and also just the five senses are just shutting off or totally shut off. So if you're not a visual person, and if you experience the world mostly in other ideas, other ways, then the nimitta would be that those other ideas are just gorgeous, beautiful, really strong, otherworldly as well. So I often say that in the nimittas, when you actually see like a light nimitta, it's often just I know I haven't found any better way of saying it, more blue than any blue you've ever seen in the world. More yellow, it's like you can't make a yellow like that. It doesn't exist in this world. You've never seen anything like it before. It's yellow, but intense yellow. More yellow than yellow, the usual way of saying it. So these are signs of nimittas. They're very powerful, joyful. And afterwards, they leave you with this beautiful sense of, when you come out afterwards, the afterglow. When you're really happy, peaceful for a long time. So if that's happening to you, then that's fine. If all those other criteria are met, then maybe that's the case. It can be nimittas.
So, but Ajahn, couldn't that include also like feelings like softness or warmth or bliss?
Yeah, no, that's a physical feeling in the body. That is, it has to be a bliss, but it can't be centered on anywhere in the body. It's disembodied. So you don't know where it is. It's not outside of you, not inside of you, not on your forehead or anywhere. But it is just a beautiful feeling which you might perceive. So like, the body. But it's not on the body at all. And it's also very stable. So, it's not as if it moves from place to place. Stillness, power. And if you experience it more and more, you realize it's never a state of any of the five senses. It's the sixth sense, the mind. And what's happening is you're interpreting it, you're understanding it for yourself through one of these other senses.
Yeah. I think that's what the question implied.
Yeah.
That it's
okay, good.
A similar thing, just experienced through a different sense.
Yeah.
Would you say that's possible?
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
Okay. I think that's all for today.
One more question.
Well, there's only a couple of questions which are not directly related to the retreat. Do you want them anyway?
Yeah, go on. I'll answer them quickly.
Okay. So what is your view on animal rights, advocating compassion, leading by example, by being plant-based?
Do the best you possibly can. You can't be perfect.
Is that all?
Yeah, I've got to be quick. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
When my mom chants, she says, while chanting, her mind wanders off. In this case, is chanting useless because she's not thinking of the meaning of the sutta? What should she do when this happens?
It depends what the sutta is. If they're really chanting, say, the Metta Sutta, it used to happen to me. I chanted the Metta Sutta. I had to stop halfway. My mind didn't wander off. It wandered in, deep into the meaning of that sutta. I'm just blissing out. Couldn't do anymore. So sometimes that type of chanting, great. If you're wandering in, become more peaceful and blissful, fine. But if you're wandering off, it's just not paying much attention, not enjoying it. If you're enjoying something, what you're chanting, remember just your favorite music when you were growing up, whatever band it was, whether it was Led Zeppelin or whether whoever it was, because I knew that like them. But but whoever it was, you can chant that very easily. Your mind doesn't wander off because you're enjoying it. So don't try willpower and focusing and fear. You to enjoyment. It's a beautiful chant. Learn it, what it means. And some of the chants are gorgeous. And that's one of the reasons when you know what it means. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness. So you'll be contented and easily satisfied, not proud and demanding in nature. That's what we chant in the English translation of the medicine. It's beautiful. And it's inspiring for meditation. Let me be contented and easily satisfied. This is good enough. I'm happy to be here, not proud and demanding anything. It's a great meditation. So if you understand it, it's easy to chant and you really enjoy it.
Another one's come now.
Okay, quick.
But it's very short. Can coffee be a hindrance to meditation?
It can be, but it's usually not. It depends on how much you drink. Sometimes it can make you really wired. Yeah, make you really wired. And that's not good. You're just thinking too much. You can't stop it. But if you're really, really tired and you take a little bit of it, just the right amount, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's everything. So it's now time for the personal practice period, or if you're on 5 precepts, it's time for lunch, perhaps, or it's time for a rest and some lying down meditation, and we'll see you later. So again, there's going to be a 1 hour or 45-minute meditation with Matthias, and it's just a silent meditation. So basically you come into the room and nobody's going to say anything. It's just an opportunity to sit together. And I think about 30 people or so came yesterday. So it is a nice space, and it's a space of mutual support. So do come along for that if you feel you need a bit of structure. Otherwise, it's really up to you with how you spend your time. You might want to experiment between the walking and the sitting meditation, and even some standing meditation. Sometimes that can be helpful, especially with the eyes open, because sometimes the danger is with the eyes closed, you might get a little bit wobbly. I've seen that happen on retreats. Somebody suddenly bangs down to the floor and scares everybody senseless. So do be careful if you want to try that, but just have a lovely afternoon. And I don't know, is there anything more you want to say, Ajahn?
No.
Okay, so we'll let Ajahn Brahm go to bed and I'll see you this evening at 7:30 in UK time. So have a lovely afternoon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.